Dear listeners, wait, okay. Dear listeners, welcome back. Today we will talk about a little epiphany. The other day you shared a pattern with me that you've recognized. What was that?
It was the pattern of whether I was walking the correct path and the signs that were telling me whether this was correct.
Mm.
And so the way that I recognized that was when we were at home, before we left, I went onto Instagram and I saw somebody's account that I'd met in Bali. And they were celebrating a number of followers that they had accumulated. And anyway, it got me questioning around, social media and how that is and how focused it is around numbers. And I sat with it for a bit, and because I was doing my own personal reflection on being on social media for the last 7 months or so, returning back to social media. Because even in another video, I shared that I was off social media for about 7 years. Even when I had my barbershop, I actually employed a friend of mine to do all the social media for me because I just wasn't comfortable with it. I just wanted to focus on cutting hair. So even though I had a social media account at that time, a friend was looking after it. And so in the last 7 months, I've really been reflecting on how social media has, how I am showing up with social media and what's reflected back, how it ties into validation, self-worth, um, confrontation, approval, all of these things. And so because I've come from a background of being a carpenter and then I became a barber, I said, with my own shop, things like I'm a kinesthetic learner, meaning that I really have to learn. I learn by doing. I learn by using my hands. That what I noticed in the last 7 months was there's nothing that I could connect to tangibly within the social media realm. So for a while there, I was a little bit fixated on the numbers, but I didn't really have any reference to how those numbers truly correlated. Because with your help with a deeper and broader perspective and a deeper understanding, the numbers aren't always what they seem to be. But as I said, because of this past and history of hands-on and tangibility, it was something that I could easily just fall into. And so when I saw that this person was celebrating an increase in followers, at first then I kind of sat with myself and I was like, oh, wow, interesting what was coming up, and I was like, was I envious? Was I jealous? Was I curious? How was I actually feeling around this happening for the other person? And I realized that all of those things I felt, but in a very light kind of way. And at the end of the day, I was happy for the person. Good on them, because what I've noticed with social media is that there's no real landmark. There's no real pinpoint of degree of success and achievement. It's really quite a fickle space. So anyway, I went to the gym and I was doing my thing, and as I was working out, I it it popped into my mind the exact number of followers that I had on Instagram. It was like almost like a photographic memory. I just saw it, and I was like, wow, that's interesting. Because as you know, over the last 7 months, tried many different approaches when it came to social media, even reached out, paid for some mentorship, got coaching, and went down certain paths, a month and a half into mentorship with all these videos and making these content, and actually stopping and going, this doesn't feel like me. This is not authentic. It's not really representing who I am and what I do and how I do it. So literally starting fresh and then going another direction, using all the knowledge and information that I gathered, but then going in another direction. And honestly, I feel like I've done that 3 times in this last 7 months. But then when this number came to my mind, it actually it wasn't so much about the number, but it was more about me questioning whether this was actually even the path that I was meant to be going. Because to be completely honest, I feel that I have been trying to condense myself to fit into this format, particularly Instagram. And that was the part that never felt genuine. That was the part that always brought up discomfort because I'm trying to articulate myself and my whole experience, what feels like, into a very, very, very small window.
Mm-hmm.
And as I've shared in other videos, cutting hair for the homeless and that deep, enriching experience, living in a remote Aboriginal community, working at an Aboriginal drug and alcohol rehabilitation centre, being a person who has traveled the world, experienced things, and really puts themselves out there to have that firsthand experience and authentic connection was very hard to translate onto Instagram. And so I realized that I was like an old pattern, I was making myself smaller to fit in. When really, what is more supportive is actually sharing or being a part of, and connecting to a container that can actually hold one's capacity. And stepping into a space like YouTube where there's longer forms, where you can really open up and share the details of an experience or the depth of a reflection. And to me, that matters most. And so the epiphany was actually within the surrender. Because when I realized that I was doing it for the sake of doing it to kind of fit in, and I was making myself small, then I realized it was unnecessary, and it wasn't true to who I actually am. And I'd rather put a lot of my more attention into longer forms, and then use that for shorter forms instead of trying to calibrate on a smaller platform such as that. So I really kind of use somebody in that moment in that processing. I use somebody else's example of their experience on social media, connected to how that actually made me feel, realized that I didn't want what they had, because at the end of the day, if a person, as an example, becomes successful on a platform such as Instagram, then that is their journey. Their teachings, their lessons are wrapped up within that experience. And I honestly believe that, like anything, it's either meant to happen or it's not.
Mm.
And if we force it to happen, are you actually going against the grain? Are you actually not really listening to the signs that are telling you, hey, this is not your path? You're actually meant for something bigger, or you're meant to actually be on a bigger stage to be able to share more. And so I don't look at it as right or wrong. I just look at it like, is whether it's aligned or whether it's not aligned. And so when I reflected on that, I realized, well, I haven't had the progression that I thought one might have in that time frame, considering the amount of output and energy going into it. So I recognize that that is not the path, and that's okay. And I can still show up, but I'd rather show up in a different form and let that river run in. And that to me is more important, because it's about recognizing where you're putting your energy and what that resistance is telling you. And I said, if you've shown up and tried and these are the results, then you can say you've tried.
You have to listen to it, kind of, and not force things, like with everything in life.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm.
Because if you're forcing something that's not even meant to be, then it is a waste of energy and it is a waste of time. But it takes the awareness to recognize, oh, this might not actually be my path, and that's okay. And being genuine about that, being honest. And because, I mean, if you think about it, for people who have literally forced their way down a particular path, does it actually end up working out for them? I don't think it does, because there'll be harder lessons within it.
Yeah.
And as I said, I believe that we're all guided to the lessons we're meant to learn. And that's the thing, because you see successes on, well, like, big increases of following. I don't know whether that translates into success, but you see big increases of following over short periods of time for particular people. And I think that's their destiny, which
Like
is
meant to be for them for specific reasons.
exactly. And
Do you feel like this initial resistance that you had around Instagram anyways, or around social media, because you kind of worked through it and told yourself, okay, I gotta do this now, and it's a big achievement to step over your discomforts and out of your comfort zone, right? And during that journey, you also felt like it might not be your path, but you kept pushing because you thought that's what you have to do?
yeah, I would say so. I mean, because it was a when I reflect back on how far I've come within those 7 months, I'm very proud of the discomfort I've been able to sit with and the motivation that I've generated, that stepping into a space that I knew that I wasn't comfortable with, but I was willing to give it a go. Because I always believe that what is on the other side of discomfort is where the teachings actually lie. But I agree with you. I think that it's so easy to get caught up in a misconception that something such as Instagram for your business is very beneficial or it works out. But it's like anything. If your output and to then return is not adding up, then there should be some questioning. It's like if you're investing into something but you're not really getting much of a return or seeing results in that way, then it'd be up for discussion.
Yeah.
In any other part. So, and for me, it was really just about that self-witnessing, what was coming up and how that was, and I mean, as an example, I remember a time where I shared with a friend that I could never see myself holding up a camera and talking to the camera, and then I was able to do it. I was like, okay, great, because I believe in the work that I'm doing, and I see results daily.
You were just looking for a way to get it out there, right? To
Yeah.
just make it known that it's there.
Exactly. But then it was like, when this pattern kind of showed itself, I realized how it was tied into other moments within my life of like keeping myself smaller. And so there's a lot to be said about self recognizing and recognizing how you are showing up and also how you're holding back and why that is. So everything happens for a reason in the way of timing. And so I now know that I feel confident. Like I enjoy doing this stuff now. It's really fun. But it's about finding the right calibration where you feel comfortable to share how and however that looks and feels to an individual. And that's if you want to share. If you don't want to share, because I mean, even myself as a person who invested a lot of time into exploration and adventure around the world, I did that because I wanted to do it, and I didn't really publicize it. In fact, haven't really told too many stories about it because that's not the intention of why I did it. So it's kind of nice to create these containers to actually share a bit more and remind myself of the beautiful adventures that have been had.
Like a digital diary.
Yeah, and just digital insight, I guess.
Beautiful.
Mm.
Thank you for sharing.
Oh, thank you.